This city in the United States is trying to recruit more Latino and immigrant residents, and they are paying for relocation. Topeka, Kansas is a Midwestern city with a population of a little over 100,000 people. Recently, the city's mission has been to bring more economic development and support for employers through their Choose Topeka program. With this incentive, Latinos and immigrants can receive up to $15,000 if they rent or buy homes in the city and are employed by businesses that have partnered with the program with a minimum salary requirement of $50,000. Those who apply must have permission to work in the US, and the program isn't just open to Latinos and immigrants, it was recently expanded to military and returning residents. The city has admitted that they are dependent on immigrant, Latino, and Hispanic labor, and well, the truth is, the whole country is, so maybe it's time for immigration reform so more Latinos and more immigrants can be a part of incentives like this. But what do you guys think about this?
The most interesting thing about this is that you heard her state that specifically they're looking for immigrants, they're looking for Latinos, they're looking for Hispanics, all of which are very specific. They're talking to a specific demographic. Now, you've had some people out here that when you have programs like this that speak to a specific demographic, they like to tend to call this racist. They want to say that, oh, you shouldn't specifically deal with things because of a race or this or that. It should just be divvied out to any American, right? And the most interesting part is that we have Topeka doing this. We got these businesses doing this, and they're specifically asking and looking for a certain group. Now we know that we have black people out here that are lacking in jobs and job support, and it's pretty interesting how they never offer this up to any black Americans. But who am I? But I want to go to a very specific person who has spoken about these things before and has made sure to make it his life's goal to end anything that specifically states that they are going off of a race or ethnicity or whatnot or whatever, because we're all Americans. Right. So I just want to highlight everything instead of trying to go through it one by one. I'm just going to have everything up there for you guys to see that I'm going to go over. So in the upper right hand corner, right, it says he worked for years to overturn affirmative action and finally won his case, but he is not done yet. Edward Blum has been working towards the end of race-based admissions in higher education for years. He first brought the issue of affirmative action before the Supreme Court back in 2012 with Fisher versus University of Texas, a case he ended up losing. Since then, the 71-year-old legal activist has founded a group called Students for Fair Admissions, which just won at the Supreme Court against Harvard and the University of North Carolina in a decision that effectively ended race-based affirmative action policies in American college admissions. Now, with a legal victory in hand, Mr. Bloom is thinking about what's next in his work to remove the consideration of race from other parts of American life and law. In a wide-ranging discussion, he stated about how he'll be watching to make sure elite institutions of higher learning abide by the court's recent decision and why he thinks corporate America will be facing scrutiny next. So, again, you have David Bloom, who has made it his life's goal to eradicate the talk of race or anything that would potentially disqualify anybody of Caucasian heritage, because he immediately feels that if you are just specifically doing something for one group of people, then automatically it's racist because everybody is American and yada, yada, yada. But yet, as I told you before with the previous video, you have a group, you have businesses that are specifically seeking out one group of individuals so that they can move, relocate, and work and be hired specifically because they need the laborers, they need the workers, they need a boost or a boom in economic growth in order for them to continue on, right? But again, this would go right with Mr. Bloom. So technically, he should be speaking out against this, right? And many others just like him, they should be speaking out against this because this is, going against the whole thing of everybody's American, everybody, looks the same, is the same, everybody's God's children, but obviously not. So now we're going to deal with what's on the left side of the screen. It says Federal Appeals Court blocks Fearless Fund from issuing grants to only Black women. The United States Federal Court of Appeals panel suspended a venture capital firm's grant program for Black women business owners, ruling that a conservative group is likely to prevail in its lawsuit claiming that the program is discriminatory. The ruling against the Atlanta based Fearless Fund is another victory for conservative groups raging a sprawling legal battle against corporate diversity programs that have targeted dozens of companies and government institutions. The case against the Fearless Fund was brought last year by the American Alliance for Equal Rights, a group led by Edward Blum, the conservative activist behind the Supreme Court case that ended affirmative action in college admissions. Blum applauded the ruling by stating this, quote, programs that exclude certain individuals because of their race, such as the ones the Fearless Funds have designated and implemented, are unjust and polarizing. Fearless Fund CEO and founder Ariane Simone stated that the ruling was devastating for the organization and that the women it has invested in. Quote, the message these judges sent today is that diversity in corporate America, education, or anywhere else should not exist. These judges brought what a small group of white men were selling. Alfonso David, Fearless Fund's legal counsel, who served as president and CEO of Global Black Economic Forum, stated that all options were being evaluated to continue fighting the lawsuit. In a 2-1 ruling, the panel of United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in Miami found that Blum was likely to prevail in the lawsuit, claiming that the grant program violates Section 1981 of the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the base of race when enforcing contracts. Construction era law was originally intended to protect formerly enslaved people from economic exclusion, but anti-affirmative action activists have been leveraging it to challenge programs intended to benefit minority owned businesses. The court ordered the Fearless Fund to suspend its Strivers Grant Contest, which provides $20,000 to businesses that are majority owned by Black women. For the remainder of the lawsuit that is being litigated in the federal court in Atlanta, the ruling reversed a federal judge's ruling last year that the contest should be allowed to continue because Blum's lawsuit was likely to fail. However, the grant contest has been suspended since October after a separate panel of federal appeals court swiftly granted Blum's request for an emergency injunction while he challenged the federal judge's original order. The appeals court panel consists of 2 judges appointed by former President Donald Trump and 1 appointed by former President Barack Obama, rejected the Fearless Fund's arguments that the grants are not contracts but charitable donations protected by the First Amendment right of free speech. So, as we can clearly see, Blum is on a roll at this moment in time, and I just got to give a specific special shout out to the women out there that are supporting men like David Blum. You guys are really doing the work out there, even if it is against your own best interest. Again, shout out to the women out there because I'm not sure if people are actually pointing out or looking in the direction of the individuals who are specifically plotting on their own demise by allowing men like David Blum to, in a sense, rule and to have an opinion on what another group of women are specifically doing. Again, what this woman is doing is nothing wrong. She's specifically trying to help out a minority group of women who normally would not have a shot or a chance or would have a very, very tough time, Herculean task, some may say, to try and acquire a loan or what have you in order for them to start up their business. We all know this to be true, but some other people want to make it seem as though that they have a fair shot just as if everybody else has a fair shot, which is a 100% lie because the United States was meant to be profitable for one demographic, not everybody. So now we're going to look at the lower left-hand side. At MIT, Black and Latino enrollment drops sharply after affirmative action ban. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT's, incoming class of 2028 saw a drop off in percentages of Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Pacific Islander students. The university announced on Wednesday. It is MIT's first undergraduate class to be admitted since the United States Supreme Court's decision last year banning affirmative action. And MIT is the first major university to release statistics on the composition of its freshman class since the High Court's ruling. For the incoming class of 2028, about 16% of students are Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Pacific Islander, compared with the baseline of about 25% of undergraduate students in recent years. The comparison to the class of 2027 was also dramatic. The percentage of Black students enrolled dropped to 5% from 15%, and the percentage of Hispanic and Latino students dropped to 11 from 16%. White students made up 37% of the new class, compared with 38% last year. On the other hand, the percentage of Asian American students in the class jumped to 47% from 40%. The percentages do not add up to 100% according to MIT because students could declare more than one race. Edward Blum, the founder of Students for Fair Admissions, the organization that successfully sued to end race-conscious admissions, welcomed the decision as proof that the Supreme Court's ruling was having a positive effect. Quote, every student admitted to the class of 2028 at MIT will know that they were accepted only based upon their outstanding academic and extracurricular achievements and not the color of their skin. Now, I want people to understand while Mr. Bloom, right, is worried about the race and he's really up in arms about this, he's not focused on the fact of the rich Caucasians out there that are cheating the system in order to get their children into certain colleges just so that they can have bragging rights. We had a rich celebrity or two that did that in order to, get those bragging rights and to get their kids into these colleges and to say that they were playing these so-called sports. They literally paid off, coaches and all these other types of people and then got caught up and only served a few years. But Mr. Bloom doesn't care about that, right? Because he'll say that that's a one-off. That's not indicative of every parent directly out there or every student directly out there, right? But yet, what we do know is that Mr. Bloom, underneath all of the things that he is trying to do, he is fighting for his own people. This is why he is going so hard on trying to make sure that the colleges only quote unquote allow people who have the grades in order to get in. And the funniest thing is that Bloom is not focusing on the fact that a lot of those Black students who are more than likely at MIT, who actually do deserve to be there, normally wouldn't be looked at because they're coming from, let's say, urban areas, right? They're coming from the hood. They're not, coming from the most awesome or greatest of high schools and whatnot. So a lot of people aren't going to, in a sense, look directly at them. They're going to look more so at the students that are coming from private high schools or other types of institutions versus the standard public school education. But let's continue. So now let's focus on the real reason why Mr. Bloom wanted to get rid of affirmative action. In the coming days, the United States Supreme Court is expected to rule in the potentially landmark case on the constitutionality of affirmative action. The original lawsuit was filed on behalf of Abigail Fisher, a woman who claimed that she was denied admission to the University of Texas because she is white. But study after study shows that affirmative action helps white women as much or even more than it helps men and women of color. Ironically, Fisher is exactly the kind of person affirmative action helps the most in America today. Originally, women weren't even included in legislation attempting to level the playing field in education and employment. The first affirmative action measure in America was an executive order signed by President Kennedy back in 1961 requiring the federal contractors, quote, Take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. In 1967, President Johnson amended this and a subsequent measure including sex, recognizing that women also face discriminatory barriers and hurdles to equal opportunity. Meanwhile, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 only included sex in the list of prohibited forms of discrimination because conservative opponents of legislation hoped that including it would sway moderate members of Congress to withdraw their support for the bill. Still, in a nation where white women and black people were once considered property, not allowed to own property themselves, and not allowed to vote, it was clear to all of those who were seeking fairness and opportunity that both groups faced monumental obstacles. While people of color individually and as groups have been helped by affirmative action in the subsequent years, data and studies suggest women, white women in particular, have benefited disproportionately. According to one study, in 1995, 6 million women, the majority of whom were white, had jobs they wouldn't have had otherwise held, but because of affirmative action. Another study shows that women made greater gains in employment at companies that do business with the federal government, which are therefore subject to federal affirmative action requirements than in other companies, with female employment rising 15.2% at federal contractors but only 2.2% elsewhere. And the women working for federal contracting companies also held higher positions and were paid better. Even in the private sector, the advancements of white women eclipsed those of people of color. After IBM established its own affirmative action program, the numbers of women in management positions more than tripled in less than 10 years. Data from subsequent years show that the number of executives of color at IBM also grew, but not nearly at the same rate. So again, I just want to give a special shout out to the women out there that support men like David Blum, who he has made it his life's goal in order to destroy something that enabled women all over in order to make it, right? To have an equal opportunity, an equal shot to make money, to be on the same footing as men. Remember, as they stated in the article before, both women and people of color were considered objects, property at one point in time. Affirmative action was used in order to level the playing field of which was unleveled originally. And when it was leveled, you saw what was able to take place. Even though there were, still some uneven areas, things were still progressing further than what it would have if this never existed. And again, you have people out here that support Bloom, just like the white woman that wanted to file or help them file some type of lawsuit in order to say that she couldn't get into this college because she was white. She yet again worked against her own best interest to set women back, specifically women that look just like her. And again, this is the main goal and the main reason of why it is that David Bloom and men like David Bloom wanted to get rid of affirmative action. They're doing this in order to set or to put the women of their area in a certain place because they want America to go back to a certain point in time where their men were great, right? And their women were seen at a certain level. They were seen and quote unquote not heard, right? They're trying to put themselves back in the area where they were the main people on top. Right, and everybody had to listen to them. They don't want an era. They don't want a time where people are on a sense the same level, the same education scale, the same money scale, right? Because if you put everything at the same level, then you can't say that you're as great as you say that you are, because now you have to look at everybody else in the face as you say it. It's a lot easier to say that when you make it to the top of a mountain that had a bridge that allowed you to go up to the top, but then you decided to burn it. And then everybody else that wanted to get to the top, they have to now climb. See how that works? So that's pretty much what Mr. Bloom and men like him want to accomplish. But again, you have a lot of women out there that are backing and that support Bloom, even if it means that they have to get rid of or take some of their own rights. Again, you have a lot of women that are fine with having a certain standard of living if it means like men like David Bloom have the little bit of power or whatever it is that they have, and they're able to continuously hold that up until, you know, everything is done for. But anyways, let me know what you guys think about this video and everything that's stated in the comment description below. And as always, peace, love, and stay tuned for the next video.